digestive system, I'm not putting that as an apomorphy, okay? So the only time you should take anything as a synapomorphy is when there's two stars there, okay? I marked those because digestive systems have evolved several times here. So nonetheless, when it's a complete digestive system, it's still a step up from what we've seen with the gastrovascular cavity, because now there's a one-way flow of food from the mouth to the anus, whereas in the gastrovascular cavity, you can't have that. And as a consequence of complete digestive system, then you can have specialization along the route, which is not possible with gastrovascular cavity. And when we get to the digestive system in animals a little bit later on, physiology, we'll be looking at digestion. So as far as the synapomorphies, there's quite a few. One is something called a muscular foot. Now, when you see this word foot, you always, of course, think of your own feet. That's not what we're referring to here. This is just simply a musculated structure, usually on the ventral side of the animal, that allows locomotion. Okay, so if you've seen snails moving along, they're moving along on their muscular foot. Okay, it's just a musculated structure that's down underneath. And something, the visceral mass, I'll explain here in a moment. Something that's interesting is that they have an extra ectodermal layer besides the epidermis. Okay, usually the outer skin is called the epidermis, and they have something that's called a mammal. Okay, so this mammal. Okay, this is my drawing. Did I give this to you? Do you have it in your notes? Okay, all right. I'll make it available. But nonetheless, this is the ventral part, and this I'm looking at a cross section. Okay, cross section through the animal. Skin is right here, and so all the digestive material, brain, circulatory system, reproductive system, as in any animal, is going to be inside where the epidermis, the skin happens to be. And so that's just called the visceral mass. But on the dorsal side, what grows out and around the animal is another layer that's called the mantle. And between the mantle and the visceral mass is where the epidermis happens to be, is a space that's called the mantle cavity. Now this is not a coelom, because this cavity is continuous with the outside. Okay, it's not inside. They do have a coelom inside the visceral mass, all right? And oftentimes, this mantle will secrete a shell, calcium carbonate shell. And so in some cases, they've lost that shell, but they still retain the mantle, all right? So this originally was probably used for film feeding, because that's exactly what many different clams, bivalves, clams, oysters, and others, they use the mantle to, mantle cavity there to filter feed, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So that is, which creates all this. It creates a mantle cavity, right? And at the mouth, they have a toothed organ, rasping organ that is called the radula. So this is what they use to scrape a lot of material off of their substrates. For example, snails will be eating, for example, algae. And this here, these teeth are able to move back and forth, sort of like a saw. And this is what's referred to as a radula. And other characteristics, these are the only synapomorphic I'm going to give for this, is sexually, most of these are dioecious. Okay, so they have sac males and females. They do have a respiratory system by means of gills. Okay, usually the gills are in the mantle cavity. Some of these are large enough and thick enough that just infusion of oxygen is insufficient. And so they do have sort of a circulatory system. Usually if some animal has a respiratory system, the respiratory system is for collecting oxygen from the external environment. And in this case, gills is for in water, extracting oxygen that's dissolved in the water. Something that has a respiratory system usually has some sort of circulatory system as well. This is an open circulatory system, in contrast to what we have is a closed circulatory system. Okay, our closed circulatory system, we have a pump that moves fluid, and that fluid that's being moved by the pump is always inside of some sort of blood vessel. Okay, that's a closed circulatory system. But a lot of animals have a pump, which we still call a heart, and that is not homologous with our hearts, not in the least bit. Okay, in biology, we're using a lot of words for something that's analogous functions, but not the same evolutionary origin. Okay, so they do have a pump there and a blood vessel, but that blood vessel just opened into body seal, so that it will take in body fluids and just keep the body fluids circulating, but that body fluid is not contained in blood vessels. Okay, that's an open circulatory system. Okay, so those are some characteristics that they have. All right, and you don't need to know the name, the scientific names here. I'm going to put the scientific names of the native groups. It'd be nice if you did use them, but you don't have to use common names. I'm just going to mention polyblackchlorids, called chitins. They're all marine, and you'll probably never see them. The only major thing here about them is that they have, let me back up here, is that the mammal shell is made up of 8 dorsal plates. That's all, just 8 dorsal plates. But after that, this is probably the body pretty close to the ancestral type of mollusk, and other types of mollusks have been more advanced. Okay, so this case, okay, gastropoda. These are snails and slugs. Okay, common name is gastropods. And one of the apomorphies, I do want you to know that's in apomorphic of these, is that they have undergone a certain sort of body torsion, twisting of the body. Instead of being a straightforward animal where we have a head or a mouth at one end and an anus at the opposite end, the middle part of the body during their embryological development sort of twists, okay, or rotates, so that the intestines, here you have the mouth, comes up here, stomach, and then the intestine goes backwards so that they poop on their head. Okay, so their anus is just right above their head, and a lot of this torsion is served by the same developmental genes, which leads to a spiral shell as well. Okay, and so that is something unique for gastropods. The only difference between a snail and a slug, slugs are just snails that no longer produce a shell. Okay, and so they have lost shells independently multiple times. So all slugs are not evolutionarily related to each other, but all snails and slugs together constitutes a monophyletic group. Okay, so slugs have lost the shell, but they still have the torsion. Even though it looks like you've seen out here in Santa Cruz Mountains, banana slugs, yellow big things, still the internal organs are twisted around. Okay? They still have that torsion. And bivalve. These are clams, oysters, scallops, things that are usually called shellfish a lot of times. They're called bivalvia because the mantle is divided into 2 halves, which are called valves. Okay, so they have shell, like a clam, with a hinge on the dorsal side, and it's an elastic hinge, and the mammal secretes shells on each side. So they have two shells. And these are filter feeders, okay? Now normally, what's interesting is that when you see cartoons, you see the clam like that, right? With the eyes in there. No. That's the way they are. Okay, where the hinge of the shell is, that's the dorsal side. They open down at the bottom, and they have their muscular foot down at the bottom. And what they do with their muscular foot, okay, this is taking off one of the mantle valves. So this is the visceral mass, and that's the foot. The foot is ventral, and the shell opens ventrally, because these things are using their foot to dig down through sediments, okay? Now, when they feed, they have two large muscles that go from mantle shell to mantle shell. These are called adductor muscles, anterior, posterior adductor muscles. And when they contract, they bring that mantle shells into an air, watertight system there. So as the edges of the mantle come together, then there's no air, water that can escape out of it. However, at the posterior end, they have two tubes there called siphons, and water would come in through one siphon, the ventral one, through the mantle cavity, and flow over what are called, well, these are called gills, but these serve both respiration and also food collecting. And also they're ciliated, and as the cilia beat, this is what's creating the air current, or the water current. So this has small organic material in it. They get stuck in the mucus that covers these gills. So then the circulation comes up and around and then leaves through the excurrent siphon. And then cilia on here bring those food particles up toward the head. They have a mouth up here, something called palps, which are musculated. They can pick up that mucus and stuff it in their mouth. And so they're filter feeders. And this is how they work. And I'll go over this in lab. All right, so apomorphy, two halves to the mantle shell. Hinged, okay? And then the last group, and then this will stop, is a very interesting group. This is the most advanced mollusk, Cephalopoda. This is squid and octopi. The octopuses are very intelligent, so these are pretty intelligent critters. So apomorphy here is the fusion of the muscular head, or the muscular foot and head. Many of them have lost the mantle shell. So what constitutes the muscular foot? These tentacles. They're around the mouth. The mouth is right between those tentacles, and so the mouth is on the head, and the tentacles are derived from the muscular foot. Okay, so that completely surrounds their mouth, and that's what this word means. Cephalopoda is head, foot, animal. Okay, head, foot. All right, so the only ones that have a shell are nautilus, and in the Paleozoic, there's about 5 different groups of mollusks that are no longer around. Okay, they went extinct. Okay, and they were different. So here they reduced shells. Almost all of these are predators. All of them are predators, and they've evolved. The squid and all of them have evolved a jet propulsion using their mantle. So they still have a siphon. Okay, it's right below their head, where they can take water into the mantle cavity, and then by contracting the muscles of the mantle cavity, push the water out, and they can zip backwards real quickly. Okay, they go backwards when they do that. Okay, and some of these are really, as I said, have pretty high intelligence. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop. Yes.
In the slide you give us, we have the second apomorphy, reduction or loss of mantle shell.
I have it up here. You can count it, but it's some of them still have mantle shell under the skin, under the mantle layer. But if I have it there, so that apomorphy, you can count it. Yes. Okay. All right. This is where I will stop. Incidentally, there's a story about octopus. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard it several times. There was a research lab, so don't quote me on this. It's just sort of fun to talk about. They had and since I've heard it from 2 or 3